Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This time not for the One Piece trading card game, but instead for the card game Flesh and Blood. I've been playing Flesh and Blood a lot, like a lot. I play it every week at my local store. Sometimes I play games on Talishar, as anyone would. So I guess I play it as much as a normal person then. The reason I'm making this video is for actually two reasons. One, with a recent ban and restricted announcement for Flesh and Blood, one of my favorite heroes, Fai, has gotten one of their more popular played cards banned, which I never played anyway because that card is absolutely terrible. So I wanted to show my deck list because I think this is a very competitive option that people can play instead of that deck with Belittle, the card that was banned, if you didn't know. The second reason is because I really wanted to show a green deck. However, Odin is pretty much the same deck I showed in the Odin review, because we don't have the stuff from set 2 yet, and that doesn't make it interesting. And if I showed Kid, I wanted to show Hybrid Kid, but Hybrid Kid isn't good until we get set 2 because we don't have the 8-drop Odin yet. So, either way, I couldn't show a green deck. Which, I suppose next week I could show it with set 2, but it wasn't even ready to be shown anyway. So, I'm doing this instead. So with that said, let's get started. Looking at our weapon and equipment, you can see that we just play the Searing Emberblade. Fais really have a pretty hard choice of which weapon to play. Usually it will be Searing Emberblade, but some decide to play Kodachis. I think that deck is okay, but you can't really play Draconic with Kodachi, so it has to be Searing Emberblade in this situation, since this is a Draconic Fai deck. Looking at our helms, we have Mask of Momentum and Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. You'll usually be playing Pouncing Lynx because it can grab you a Phoenix Flame if you need it for your Phoenix forms, or it can grab you Assault the Wound to just do big damage. In our slower matchups, or against something like Dromai, it's better to bring in a Mask of Momentum. This is because they'll generally be blocking more, so Pouncing Lynx won't do much. And Mask of Momentum against Dromai is literally a free win because it procs off hitting their dragons. So why wouldn't you? I only have one chess piece, being Findle Spring Tunic. I don't own a Flamescale Furnace. If I did, I would consider playing it. However, I use Tunic a lot. A lot of the cards in this deck cost 1, and since you're not in Belittle Minnowism, which you can't be anymore, you really need that extra resource since you don't have the easy tutor for a blue to fix your hands. So I personally prefer Tunic, but if you had Furnace, I think you'll be fine just playing Furnace. For my arms, I have Tiger Stripe Shuko and No-Rune Gloves. Shuko is just the obvious choice. It's the best ninja arms in the game. It gives your second attack with base power 2 or less +1 and can't be prevented. It's just more damage, and it blocks too, so it's not terrible. We have No-Rune Gloves. These are really only for the Wizard matchup. Shuko into the Wizard matchup doesn't really matter since they're starting at less life, you need less damage, and the protection the second Arcane Barrier gives you is very useful. And then for our legs, we have Snapdragon Scalers and Tide Flippers. We play the snaps because we're on Enlightened Strike, which a lot of the time we'll be using to draw a card or give it +2, not so much to go again. So the Snapdragon Scalers can really help us there. And then the Tide Flippers are our main Arcane Barrier. We'll bring these in against any Rune Blade, and they still have a use with their active since we can use it to give Salt the Wounds go again and get an easy double Salt the Wounds turn. Next, looking at our deck list, you can see that we are on the red and blue of all of the 0 for 3 Draconic attacks, those being Brand with Cinderclaw, Lava Vein Loyalty, Rising Resentment, and Ronin Renegade. This is because these are just the best, most common attacks we could be doing. All of them are 0s for 3 at red, and with Go Again, Lava Vein Loyalty is you can't start with it, so it doesn't always have the Go Again, but it does block for 3, which 3 blocks are always pretty nice. As well as we're on the yellow Brand with Cinderclaw, and that's because not all of our attacks are Draconic, so making them Draconic lets them get benefits off of our Spreading Flames, and also make our Fai ability cheaper. Some of our strong reds that we're playing, Blaze Headlong is a no-brainer. Enlightened Strike is one of the strongest attacks Fai could be playing. Flame Call Awakening and Inflame are here since we are on 3 Phoenix form. And speaking of Phoenix form, 3 Phoenix form. We are on 3 Phoenix Flame since you have to be on at least one, and the effects we get from Phoenix form are really good. It's so easy to stack up 2 flames that we can easily make Phoenix form a 0 for 5. And in some situations, we do get to hit the 3 Phoenix form, and then we just pretty much win at that point because we are extending our turns so much. Then we're on 3 Ravenous Rabble, since our deck really doesn't have too many blues or yellows. It's mostly reds since we are on a Draconic deck. So this will generally be coming in for 4, and even if it doesn't, it's a red that starts our chain for a Blaze Headlong, a Flame Call Awakening, or an Inflame, so it's not terrible. Then we're on some of our pumps, 3 Spreading Flames. I really wouldn't play Fai without it, since even if your deck isn't mostly Draconic, even if you're playing something like Kodachi Fai, the small amounts of yellow and blue Draconic attacks that you're playing make Spreading Flames definitely worth it. As well as the 3 Art of War, generally the best card in this deck, since giving your whole board +1 attack and being able to see more cards makes Art of War such an amazing thing, as well as being able to play it off of your Tunic, making it pretty much free because you don't mind getting rid of 1 bad attack to get 2 new ones, makes Art of War an amazing card. I can't say it enough how good that card is. We're on 3 Salt the Wound. We're on Salt the Wound mainly because it has higher payoffs than Lava Burst, since Lava Burst really only comes in for 5. You could play it if you wanted, but on turns I've gotten double salts off, and if you do decide to play this deck and you get double salt turns off, you know how strong this card is in comparison to Lava Burst. And then we're on 3 Blue Rise from the Ashes. A lot of Fai lists are on Red Rise, but personally I prefer the blue one just to have an extra pitch in this deck, since we do have a few 1-cost cards in the Spreading Flames, Art of War, and Flame Call Awakening, plus some cards in our sideboard, so we really need that resource to start our turn in those early turns that we don't have our Tunic resource ready. Next, we'll be talking about the sideboard. If you've noticed, or maybe you haven't, our main deck is 60 cards, and this is because the way I build Flesh and Blood decks, I look for a main set of cards, and then I do the equipment, and then after that, I see how many cards I have left, and I decide on what I want for the sideboard. Sometimes it is less than 60, and that's fine. That's how normally people will build. They'll get a set of maybe 54, and then they'll always bring in cards each game. But sometimes, you don't need that, and you'll also be subbing out different cards, so I wanted a main package of 60. But looking at our sideboard, we have 3 Ancestral Empowerment. This card is mainly here for our slower matchups or our Runeblade matchups. This card's great to see against decks like Bravo and Oldhim, because it can be a card to replace itself and get over 1 when they block, and it's very good versus Runeblades, since it is a 3 block that does replace itself if we need to play it, so it's not too bad. I wouldn't play this against Dromai since there are other things we need. and I wouldn't play this against something like an Icelander or a Lexi because either A, this card does nothing, or B, 3 block isn't going to help us. When you bring in the Ancestral Empowerment, I would just add it in. It replaces itself, and yes, it makes some of your draws a little worse early since it's not always super easy to play out, but on some turns you can just Arsenal it, make them think you have something like Assault the Wound or an Art of War, but it's actually an Ancestral Empowerment, and you just get an extra card later, so it's not really terrible. Next is 3 Breaking Point. This is mainly here for our Ranger matchups. Azalea can definitely be a terror, especially since the ice decks that sort of restricted her since she was more spend all of her resources are pretty much gone since she doesn't have to worry about Winter's Wail anymore, nor Hypothermia. So Breaking Point just gets so much value since those decks are going to try to lock you out from doing anything. Azalea is going to try to hit you with a red in the ledger to stop you from doing multiple things. So destroying her arsenal can really set her back because sometimes she needs that card there to either do her effect or just it's the arrow that's going to hit you. As well as against Lexi, this card can disrupt their arsenal, making it so they can't use Lexi's ability. As well as it's just a pretty strong attack that they're going to have to block. When you bring in Breaking Point, I would suggest taking out the Enlightened Strikes, since in those matchups, Enlightened Strike really doesn't give you too much of an advantage, because that's really not a matchup you need to aggro down. It's more of a matchup where you need to play safe and play around what they're doing, so we don't need the Enlightened Strike too much. Next is going to be the 3 Sink Below. This is for our other aggro matchups that I didn't already list. Things like the Mirror, things like Dorinthia. They are going to be big things we're going to need the Sink Below against. Dorinthia, especially since that deck can give this a little trouble since we can't really block them effectively because of Reprise. And since they generally could just do more damage than us late, we need to kill them very early or have something like a Sink Below to sort of surprise them and get us an easy Dawnblade reset. When you add in Sink Below, you could just add it in. You don't need to take anything out for it because it does help us with consistency a little bit, being able to put a card on the bottom and draw another card. This card's also very strong in the Mirror since they are going to be playing a lot of 4s. That Sink Below just blocks very cleanly. Finally is going to be 3 Thaw. I don't understand why people don't play this card. This card is absolutely nuts. It's a popper for our Illusionist matchups. And this card single-handedly beats Icelander. If this card ever ends up into your discard pile, they can never afflict you with anything because you'll just get rid of it. You don't need to get rid of the Frostbites. This is mainly for the... I don't remember what it's called. I'm sorry. I don't remember the last time an Icelander has played the Affliction specialization against me, because this card just stops it. I bring it in every time, and I don't think I've lost against an Icelander on this deck because of Thaw. And prior, we would bring it in against something like an Ultim or a Lexi. But Ultim might not have the most Frostbites now since they don't have access to their Winter's Wail. And Lexi could still do it to you, so I would consider bringing maybe 2 in against a Lexi since it's not going to be their main thing since we're going to be trying to look for the breaking points instead. But Thaw just helps you in the Icelander matchup so much that I wouldn't cut this card for even CNCs in this deck. Even though CNC is strong, that's kind of why we're on the breaking point. Maybe if you wanted to cut the breaking points for the CNCs, but also breaking point is Draconic, so that's a little more useful than CNC, which, yes, they can play D-Reacts to your breaking point, but if they're going to play a D-React from Arsenal, you still got their Arsenal, so you don't really care. When you add in Thaw, consider cutting a Phoenix Form, a Flame Call Awakening, and an Enlightened Strike. You don't need 3 Phoenix Form versus the Icelander or the Dromai matchups, since it's a little hard to pull off against Icelander, and the 3 Flame hit effect doesn't do anything when you hit a dragon. You don't need 3 Flame Call Awakening, since you're adding in a card that costs 2, Flame Call costs 1, it's a little tough to get it off. And if you have something like Thaw in your hand, as well as you're not on 3 Phoenix Forms, you don't always need the extra Phoenix Flame. And the 1 Enlightened Strike, because against Icelander it could be a little hard to play if they do give you some Frostbites, as well as against Lexi. If you are bringing in Thaw, you're already cutting the 3 Enlightened Strikes for the 3 breaking points, so you'll just cut a Phoenix Form and a Flame Call Awakening to play 2 Thaw, since you really don't need 3 versus your Lexi matchups. Thank you all for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. I probably won't be doing much Flesh and Blood on this channel, but if it is well received, I will consider doing more, since there are definitely a few other decks that I really enjoy playing, and I think would be nice to do a deck list on. Next week, I hopefully will have some One Piece deck to show, if it's ready. I have no idea. I was expecting us to get the rest of the set, but we'll see how that goes. It probably won't even be ready by the time we get it, since whoever updates the tabletop needs to update it, which, I mean, they can take their time. I'm sure they have other stuff they need to be doing. But we could end up doing a deck list next week of something. I don't know. Maybe Flesh and Blood again if this is well received, as I said, but maybe we'll do... I don't know. I think one of my friends said Mono Red Luffy was picking up at their local, or just in tournaments in general. They said something about Mono Red Luffy. Maybe we do that. I don't know. But I'm gonna hope that we get the rest of the 3rd set early-ish, so we can start testing and looking at and seeing building these decks, because a lot of them seem really interesting. But that's for next week me to do, not this week. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.